The first bank called at 9:17 on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 11 days after I buried my husband. I remember the time because I was standing in my classroom with a blue marker in my hand, writing the words cause and consequence on the board for my juniors. Outside the windows, Cleveland was grey and wet, the kind of weather that makes every hallway smell like damp coats and old paper. My phone buzzed in the top drawer of my desk. I almost ignored it. Widowhood teaches you that every phone call could be another bill, another condolence, another person using that soft voice people use when they are afraid your grief might spill over onto them. But the number said Lake Erie Federal Bank. I stepped into the hallway and answered quietly. The woman on the other end said, "Mrs. Nora Whitaker?" "Yes. My name is Denise Coleman. I'm calling from the Estate Services Department. I'm very sorry for your loss." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." Then she said something that made the floor seem to tilt beneath me. "We need to confirm whether you or Mrs. Camille Whitaker will be attending the beneficiary review meeting." I did not speak. The hallway was full of lockers, fluorescent lights, and the distant sound of teenagers laughing near the vending machines. Ordinary life kept moving around me while one sentence quietly cut my world in half. "I'm sorry," I said. "Who?" There was a pause. "Mrs. Camille Whitaker," the woman repeated carefully. "Your husband's surviving spouse listed on one of the associated trust documents." My husband had been dead for 11 days. We had been married for 26 years, and according to a bank I had never heard him mention, there was another widow. Good day, dear listeners. It's Nora again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Nora Whitaker. I am 52 years old, and for most of my adult life, I taught American history at a public high school on the west side of Cleveland. I was not rich. I was not poor. I was the kind of woman who clipped coupons, paid bills on Friday evenings, kept spare batteries in a kitchen drawer, and believed that a stable life was built the same way a good lesson plan was built, one clear objective at a time. My husband, Daniel, was a quiet man. He worked as a regional sales consultant for a medical supply company. He traveled often, but not so often that I questioned it. He was polite, punctual, and careful with words, the kind of man who could sit across from you at breakfast, reading the paper, and make silence feel like peace instead of distance. We lived in a modest brick house in Lakewood with a small front porch, a maple tree that dropped too many leaves every October, and a basement full of things we always meant to sort through. I had loved Daniel in the ordinary way long marriages are loved, not with fireworks every day, but with habits. I knew how he liked his coffee. He knew I hated driving in snow. I packed his blood pressure pills when he traveled. He fixed the loose hinge on my classroom supply cabinet without telling anyone. When he died of a heart attack in a hotel room in Columbus, I thought the hardest thing I would have to survive was the sudden empty space he left behind. I was wrong. At first, the grief was practical. Funeral home forms, death certificates, insurance paperwork, thank you cards, calls from distant relatives, casseroles from neighbors. Daniel's older sister, Marlene, came over the day after the funeral and sat at my kitchen table with her hands folded around a mug of tea she never drank. "You should let me help with the paperwork," she said. "I appreciate that," I told her, "but I can manage." Marlene gave me a small, sympathetic smile. "Nora, you're a teacher. You're not used to financial matters like this." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Teachers are used to financial matters. We count every dollar. We stretch supplies. We track records. We notice when numbers do not add up. But I only nodded. Daniel had always handled most of our long-term finances. I handled household bills, groceries, utilities, insurance renewals, school expenses for our daughter before she moved to Oregon. We were not secretive. At least, I had not thought we were. After his death, I found the expected things: a checking account with enough to cover 2 months of expenses, a small retirement account, a life insurance policy that would pay off the house, credit card balances that were unpleasant but not shocking. Nothing about hidden wealth, nothing about a second widow, nothing about 3 banks. The first strange sign came 3 days after the funeral. I was cleaning out Daniel's coat closet when I found a key taped inside the lining of his old black overcoat. Not in a pocket, not on a ring. Taped inside the fabric with a strip of grey duct tape. It was small, brass, and stamped with the number 118. I stood there in the hallway holding it under the porch light, because the house felt too dim. A teacher learns to notice what does not belong. A student who suddenly stops turning in homework. A parent's signature that looks too neat. A sentence copied from the internet but softened by one changed adjective. That key did not belong. I put it in an envelope and wrote "found in coat lining" on the outside. 2 days later, I found a receipt from a storage facility in Parma. It had been folded into the back of an old road atlas in Daniel's car. The date on the receipt was 6 months before he died. The unit number was 118. I drove to the facility on a Saturday morning. The manager, a heavy-set man named Lewis, told me the account was not in my name. "It's paid through the end of the year," he said, looking at his computer. "But I can't give access without authorization." "My husband is dead," I said quietly. He looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The name on the unit is D. Mercer." Mercer was Daniel's mother's maiden name. I did not argue. I had spent 28 years in classrooms. I knew the difference between a locked door and a door that needed the right paper. I went home and added the receipt to the envelope with the key. Then the first bank called. After Denise from Lake Erie Federal said the name Camille Whitaker, I asked her to repeat it. Sometimes the mind tries to protect itself by pretending it misheard. She repeated it. I told her there must be a mistake. She said, "That may be possible, Mrs. Whitaker, but there are documents requiring review, and given the size of the assets, we need all relevant parties represented." I leaned against the cinder block wall outside my classroom. The size of what assets? Another pause. "I'm not permitted to discuss details over the phone until identity is verified," I said. "How many assets are we talking about?" She lowered her voice. "Mrs. Whitaker, I strongly recommend you consult an attorney before attending any meeting." That was the first moment I felt fear. Not grief, not confusion, fear. Because bank employees do not tell widows to get lawyers unless something is very wrong. That afternoon, I drove home through steady rain. I sat in the driveway with the engine off, while water ran down the windshield in crooked lines. Inside the house, Daniel's shoes were still by the back door. I stared at them and thought of every lesson I had ever taught about primary sources: letters, records, contracts, maps, wills, tax lists. History is not what people say happened. History is what survives in the documents. So I made a legal pad my classroom brain understood. At the top, I wrote, "What do I know?" Then I listed only facts. Daniel is dead. Bank called about estate review. Name mentioned, Camille Whitaker. Storage unit under D. Mercer. Hidden key found in coat lining. Marlene wants paperwork. Then I wrote a second question. What do I not know? That list was longer. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until nearly 3 a.m. with a cup of coffee gone cold beside me, and Daniel's old laptop open in front of me. I did not know his password. I tried our anniversary, our daughter's birthday, the name of our first dog. Nothing worked. At 3:12, I closed the laptop and whispered into the empty kitchen. "What did you do, Daniel?" The next morning, a second bank called. This one was a private wealth office downtown. The man said his name was Andrew Voss, Senior Relationship Manager. His voice was smooth and careful, the voice of someone who had been trained never to sound surprised. He asked whether I had retained counsel. I said, "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" He said, "Because there are competing spousal claims." The phrase sounded like something from a courtroom drama, except it was attached to my life. "Competing," I said. "Yes, to my husband, to certain trust and account designations connected to Mr. Whitaker." "How much money are we talking about?" He hesitated. Then he said, "More than $7 million. I sat down so quickly the chair scraped the kitchen floor. $7 million. Daniel and I had argued 2 years earlier about replacing the furnace because he said the estimate was too high. We had delayed a vacation to Maine because flights were expensive. I had bought my winter coat at an outlet mall. $7 million did not sound like money. It sounded like a crime scene. I called a lawyer before lunch. Her name was Elaine Porter, and she came recommended by our school district's union attorney. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair cut neatly at her jaw and glasses hanging from a thin chain around her neck. Her office smelled like lemon polish, paper, and old coffee. I brought the death certificate, our marriage certificate, the bank names, the storage receipt, the key, and my legal pad. She read everything without interrupting me. That alone made me trust her. When I finished, she took off her glasses and said, "Nora, I need you to listen carefully." Do not call this Camille person. Do not confront your sister-in-law. Do not contact the banks again except in writing. Do not throw anything away. Do not sign anything. I wasn't planning to. Good, she said, because polite people commit fraud all the time. They just do it with better stationery. That sentence became a kind of handrail for me. Elaine began with documents. She requested certified account information from both banks. She filed notices of representation. She ordered county marriage records in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. She requested Daniel's employment travel records. She asked for probate filings under Daniel's name, Daniel Mercer, D. Mercer, and any trust entities connected to his social security number. Then she sent me home with instructions. Write a timeline, she said. Everything you remember. Trips, odd calls, financial changes, family conversations, even things that seem small. So I did what I had asked students to do for years. I built a timeline. At first, it looked ordinary. Daniel traveled to Columbus, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Indianapolis. Then I noticed patterns. Every third Thursday for almost 4 years, Daniel had been gone overnight. He always said it was for client meetings, but when I compared those dates with credit card records, many hotel charges were missing. Cash withdrawals appeared instead. $500, $800, sometimes $1,200, always before the trips. Then there was the old house. I found the clue in a property tax envelope, tucked into a box labeled Christmas lights. The address was in a small town outside Erie, Pennsylvania. I had never seen it before. The owner was listed as Mercer Restoration LLC. Elaine searched the company. Daniel had formed it 8 years earlier. Marlene was listed as the registered agent. That was when my hands began to shake. Not because Daniel had hidden money, not even because there might have been another woman, because Marlene had sat at my kitchen table, looked at me with pity, and asked to help with paperwork. I called Elaine. She did not sound surprised. "Bring me the envelope," she said. "And Nora?" "Yes? Change the locks on your house." I did it the same day. The locksmith was a young man with a tattoo of a compass on his wrist. He talked cheerfully while he worked, and I stood in the hallway thinking that I had once believed safety was something marriage gave you. Now safety sounded like new metal turning in an old door. The third bank called 2 days later. This time it was not about a meeting. It was about an account freeze. A woman from compliance told Elaine that someone had attempted to move funds from one of Daniel's trust accounts 48 hours after his death. The request had been submitted electronically. The authorized recipient was Camille Whitaker. The backup contact was Marlene Ross, Daniel's sister. Elaine called me into her office that afternoon. She laid the papers on the conference table in neat rows. I always tell my students that documents have voices. A diary whispers. A law shouts. A receipt mutters. But bank forms are different. Bank forms do not care about your feelings. They simply stand there and testify. Elaine tapped one page with her pen. This trust was created 5 years ago. Daniel was the grantor. Camille Whitaker is listed as spouse. You are not mentioned. I swallowed. Can he just do that? He can create a trust. He cannot legally erase a lawful spouse from certain rights if assets were marital or fraudulently concealed. But we need proof. Proof that Camille isn't really his wife. Proof of everything, Elaine said. Proof of your marriage. Proof of asset origin. Proof of concealment. Proof of who knew what and when. I looked down at my hands. I feel stupid. Elaine's voice softened. No, you trusted your husband. That is not stupidity. But from this point forward, trust the records. The next week, we got our first clear answer. Camille existed. Her full name was Camille Arden Whitaker. She was 46, a corporate relocation consultant in Pittsburgh, and according to a marriage certificate filed in Allegheny County, she had married Daniel Mercer Whitaker 6 years earlier. 6 years earlier, Daniel had told me he was attending a medical sales conference in Atlanta. The officiant had been a retired judge. The witness had been Marlene. I sat in Elaine's office and read the certificate 3 times. There are betrayals that arrive like explosions. This one arrived like a worksheet marked in red ink. Name, date, signature, witness. Every line corrected the story I had believed about my life. Elaine watched me carefully. I said, "He committed bigamy." "Yes," she said. "And Marlene helped." "It appears so. Why?" Elaine placed another document in front of me. It was a lottery commission notice. 8 years earlier, Mercer Restoration LLC had received a structured payout from a private claim settlement related to a lottery pool dispute. Daniel had apparently been part of a workplace lottery group that won and then fought over the ticket. Instead of appearing publicly, several members had settled through private entities. Daniel's share, after taxes and legal fees, had been approximately $9.4 million. I stared at the number until it blurred. 8 years. For 8 years, my husband had carried a secret fortune while I packed leftovers for lunch in recycled containers. For 8 years, I had bought classroom supplies with my own money while he hid millions behind a company named after his mother. And still, the money was not the worst part. The worst part was that he had built an entirely separate life, with legal documents designed to make me look like the intruder. The pressure began quietly. First, Marlene called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was gentle. Nora, sweetheart, I know this is an overwhelming time. There are things you may not understand, and I don't want you getting hurt by lawyers who only want fees. Daniel made arrangements. He wanted peace. Call me before you make this ugly. I saved the message and sent it to Elaine. Then a letter arrived from an attorney representing Camille. It expressed sympathy. It acknowledged my long personal relationship with Daniel, but referred to Camille as the surviving legal spouse for purposes of trust administration. Long personal relationship. 26 years of marriage, reduced to a phrase that sounded like I had been a girlfriend with a drawer at his house. Elaine read the letter and smiled without warmth. They're trying to frame you early, she said. Can they win? They can try, but bigamy changes the room. Then came the visitor. I came home from school on a Thursday and found a black sedan parked across from my house. A man in a charcoal coat stood near my porch steps, holding an umbrella though the rain had stopped. He introduced himself as Victor Hale. He was Camille's attorney. Professional, calm, polite, dangerous in the way polished ice is dangerous. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, I apologize for coming unannounced. I hoped we might avoid unnecessary escalation. My attorney handles communication. Of course, he said, but sometimes lawyers complicate grief. I did not invite him inside. He glanced at my porch, my old planter boxes, the welcome mat Daniel had bought me at a fall market. Daniel cared about you, he said. No one is denying that, but he built a separate financial structure for reasons that predate your current understanding. Public litigation could expose painful details. It could affect your reputation, your daughter's reputation. That was his mistake. Mentioning my daughter, fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes the room very clear. I looked at him and said, Mr. Hale, I teach teenagers for a living. Every year, at least one student tries to intimidate me with confidence instead of facts. It has never worked. His expression did not change. I'm only suggesting discretion. And I'm only suggesting you leave my property. I had already pressed record on my phone before opening the door. When I sent the audio to Elaine, she called me within 5 minutes. Good, she said. Now we know they're worried. The next piece of evidence came from the storage unit. Elaine obtained a court order granting access, since the unit had been paid with funds traceable to Daniel and was connected to the estate dispute. Lewis, the manager, met us there on a cold morning that smelled like wet concrete and gasoline. He lifted the metal door of Unit 118, and dust rose into the air like something waking up. Inside were file boxes, not furniture, not old tools. Files, bank statements, property records, duplicate IDs, insurance binders, a locked fireproof box, a framed photograph wrapped in newspaper. The photograph showed Daniel standing in front of an old blue house with Camille. His arm was around her shoulder. Marlene stood beside them, smiling. On the porch of the house was a little girl of about 9 or 10. I touched the edge of the frame. Who is the child? I asked. Elaine looked at the photo, then at me. We'll find out. We found out through school records in Pennsylvania. The child's name was Lily Arden. Her birth certificate did not list Daniel as father, but in the storage unit, inside the fireproof box, we found a private DNA test. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Daniel had a daughter. She was 15. That night, I sat in my kitchen long after sunset. I thought I would feel hatred for the girl. I did not. Children do not create adult lies. They inherit them. I thought of my students, all the quiet burdens they carry from homes adults pretend are fine. I thought of Lily sitting in some classroom in Pennsylvania, unaware that strangers were preparing to fight over the structure of her life. I wrote her name on my legal pad, Not under enemy, but under truth. The case moved faster after that. Elaine brought in a forensic accountant named Dr. Samuel Reed, a thin, soft-spoken man who wore bow ties and treated bank transfers like fingerprints. He traced the lottery settlement into Mercer Restoration LLC. From there, Daniel had purchased the Erie house, funded trust accounts, and moved money through 3 banks. Some transfers were legal, some were not. The unlawful part was not simply that he hid money from me, it was that marital income had been mixed with secret assets. Tax filings had omitted required disclosures. Loan applications contained false statements. Insurance documents listed different beneficiaries under conflicting marital statuses. And then there were the signatures. Several documents contained my name, my signature, but I had never signed them. When Elaine showed me the copies, I felt a coldness move through my body. The signatures looked like mine from a distance. But teachers know handwriting. We read hundreds of papers, permission slips, excuse notes, and forged parent signatures every year. The N was too narrow. The W in Whitaker had the wrong slant. "That isn't mine," I said. "I know," Elaine replied. "We'll have an expert confirm it." The handwriting analyst did. The forged spousal consent forms had allowed Daniel to shift certain assets away from me and toward Camille's trust. But the expert found something even more important. The same hand that forged my signature appeared to have completed witness information on 2 other documents. Marlene's. For the first time, I understood the shape of it. Daniel had hidden the money. Camille had benefited. Marlene had helped make it legal enough to survive casual inspection. And Victor Hale had been hired to pressure me before I understood what I had found. The confrontation came on a Sunday afternoon. Marlene arrived without calling. I watched her through the front window as she climbed my porch steps, carrying a casserole dish, as if grief could be reheated and served with foil on top. I opened the door, but did not move aside. "Nora," she said, "please, I'm still your family." I looked at her carefully. She wore pearl earrings. Her coat was camel-colored and expensive. Her face was composed in that practiced way some people use when they plan to deny everything. "What do you want?" "To talk sense into you. Elaine can talk to your attorney." Her mouth tightened. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're letting strangers turn you bitter." "No," I said. "Documents did that." She looked past me into the house. "Daniel loved you in his way." That almost made me laugh. In his way. People use that phrase when the truth is too ugly to defend plainly. "He married another woman," I said. Marlene lowered her voice. "Camille gave him something you couldn't." I felt the words land. She wanted them to hurt. I let them sit there between us. Then I said, "A second marriage certificate is not something a woman gives a man, it is something he lies to obtain." Her face changed. Only for a second, but I saw it. "You don't know what Daniel went through," she said. "I know what he filed. You'll destroy Lily's life." "No," I said. "The adults already endangered Lily's life by building it on fraud. I'm trying to put the truth on record before she inherits the wreckage." Marlene gripped the casserole dish so tightly her knuckles went white. "There is a settlement available," she said. "Take it. Pay off your house. Retire comfortably. Leave the rest alone." "How much?" $500,000. I thought of $7 million. $9 million before that. 8 years of lies. But most of all, I thought of the forged signature. "No. Nora, no," I repeated. "You are not here because you care about me. You are here because evidence has started speaking louder than your version of the story." She stared at me. For a moment, I saw not Daniel's grieving sister, but a woman who had spent years believing manners could disguise cruelty. Then she set the casserole dish on the porch floor. "You always thought being good made you smart," she said. I shook my head. "No, Marlene. I thought being good meant I could sleep at night." I closed the door. The legal climax did not happen like it does in movies. There was no dramatic shouting in a packed courtroom, no sudden confession, no judge pounding a gavel while everyone gasped. Real justice is slower. It arrives in emails, subpoenas, sworn statements, bank records, deposition transcripts, and the quiet panic of people whose lies have to answer questions in order. Camille's deposition took place in a conference room downtown. I sat beside Elaine. Camille sat across from us with Victor Hale beside her. She was beautiful, in a controlled, expensive way. Cream blouse, gold watch, perfect hair, calm hands. When she looked at me, there was no shame in her face, only assessment. Elaine began gently. When did you first learn Daniel was legally married to Nora Whitaker? Camille said, Daniel told me they were separated emotionally. That was not my question. Victor objected. Elaine repeated it. Camille folded her hands. I knew he had been married. Did he tell you he was divorced? He told me the situation was handled. Did you ever see a divorce decree? No. Did you marry him anyway? Camille looked toward Victor. Yes. Question by question, the wall cracked. She admitted she knew Daniel used another address. She admitted Marlene helped with documents. She admitted Victor Hale had represented her interests before Daniel died. She admitted the Erie house was purchased through Mercer Restoration LLC so that Nora would not be distressed. Then Elaine placed the forged consent form in front of her. Have you seen this document before? Camille's face remained still, but her fingers moved against the edge of the table. I'm not sure. Elaine slid another page forward. It was an email from Camille to Marlene, recovered through subpoena. The subject line read, signature page. The body said, make sure it matches closely enough. Daniel says she never checks these things. For the first time, Camille looked afraid. Not loudly afraid. Professionally afraid. The kind of fear that calculates distance to the exit. Victor asked for a break. Elaine said, after the question is answered. The truth has a weight of its own. You can push it down for years, but when it rises, it does not need to shout. Within 2 weeks, the civil case changed shape. The banks cooperated. The probate court froze all disputed assets. The county prosecutor opened an inquiry into forgery and financial exploitation. Federal investigators became interested because of interstate banking activity and tax filings. Marlene's attorney contacted Elaine about cooperation. Camille's attorney withdrew from part of the matter, citing a conflict. I learned that phrase too. Conflict. It sounded polite. It meant the rats were finding separate corners of the ship. Daniel, of course, was beyond earthly consequences. That was one of the hardest truths to accept. The person who began the harm was gone, leaving everyone else to sort through the damage, like students cleaning a classroom after a storm they did not cause. But the law could still correct the record. The Pennsylvania marriage was declared void because Daniel was already legally married to me. The forged consent forms were invalidated. The trust was restructured under court supervision. Camille retained certain funds that were legally tied to Lily's support, because Elaine and I agreed not to punish a child for adult misconduct. But assets traced to marital property, concealed income, and fraudulent transfers were restored to Daniel's estate, my estate. Marlene pled guilty to charges connected to forgery and false witnessing. She avoided prison because she cooperated, but she lost her professional license in real estate administration and was ordered to pay restitution. Camille settled before trial. The amount was sealed, but I can tell you this, I did not get everything. No one ever does. But I got enough. Enough to pay off my house, enough to retire if I wanted to, enough to set up a protected education fund for Lily, anonymously at first, then later through her guardian ad litem when the court allowed it. Enough to stop being afraid of the mailbox. People asked me why I would help Lily. The answer is simple. Because I am a teacher. And after all those years in classrooms, I knew this much. Children remember which adults choose fairness, when revenge would be easier. I met Lily once, almost a year later. It was not planned as a sentimental scene. It happened in a courthouse hallway after a final review hearing. She stood beside a social worker, tall and thin, with Daniel's eyes and Camille's careful posture. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Did you hate me?" I felt something break open in my chest. "No," I said. "Never." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I believe you." That was all we said. Sometimes healing is not a speech. Sometimes it is 2 sentences in a hallway, with both people telling the truth as gently as they can. I sold the Lakewood house the following spring, not because I hated it, because every room had become a question. I bought a smaller house near the edge of town, with a deep backyard and enough sun for tomatoes. The first week I lived there, I planted lavender along the fence and stood barefoot in the dirt, like a woman learning gravity again. I kept teaching for 1 more year. Then I moved into part-time curriculum work, helping younger teachers build history units that focused on evidence, power, and ordinary people caught inside systems bigger than themselves. My students used to ask why history mattered. I tell them now, more than ever, that history is not just dates and wars and presidents. History is receipts. History is names on forms. History is who gets believed. History is who gets erased. And sometimes, history is a widow at a kitchen table, writing facts on a legal pad, because the story she was given no longer matches the evidence in front of her. I did not become flashy. I did not buy a sports car. I did not move into a mansion. I bought good locks, a reliable car, and a porch swing. I traveled to Maine by myself, and stood beside the ocean in a blue coat I paid full price for, without guilt. I ate clam chowder from a paper cup, and watched gulls fight over scraps. I remember laughing for the first time, without feeling disloyal to my own sadness. Freedom came quietly. It came when I stopped checking whether Daniel would approve of my choices. It came when I put my name alone on the mailbox. It came when I realized peace is not the absence of betrayal. Peace is what grows after you stop building your life around someone else's lies. I still have the brass key from Unit 1118. It sits in a small box in my desk drawer, beside a photograph of my first classroom and a note from a student who once wrote, "Thank you for teaching me how to prove my point." That key reminds me that locked things are not always hidden forever. It reminds me that patience is not weakness. It reminds me that a calm woman with documents can be more powerful than a room full of people with secrets. If there is one lesson I want you to take from my story, it is this. Do not ignore the small thing that does not belong. The strange receipt, the missing statement, the name you have never heard. The person who pressures you to sign quickly. The relative who calls concern by its first name but control by its last. Ask questions. Keep records. Make copies. Get counsel. And never let anyone convince you that wanting the truth means you are greedy, bitter, or cruel. Money was never the real story. Money was only the door. Behind it, I found betrayal. I found fraud. I found a child who deserved better. I found a version of myself I had forgotten during years of being reasonable for everyone else. I thought my husband died poor. Then 3 banks called me about his second widow, and in the end, what I inherited was not just money. I inherited the truth. I inherited my own name back. So tell me, dear listeners, what would you have done if a bank called after your husband's funeral and mentioned another widow? Would you have confronted the family right away, or would you have done what I did and followed the documents quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story reminded you of someone who needs courage, patience, or proof, send it to them. Sometimes the truth waits years to be found, but when it finally comes into the light, it can set more than one person free.